Okay, I'm doing this video to hopefully, maybe mostly for me, but hopefully will help some other people out there that have had problems. I have an old 88 Corvette out there that you can see behind my house up on jack stands. I've had it for years and years and years, and not too long ago I replaced the instrument cluster in it and everything was fine. But then shortly after that, the speedometer quit working. So I pulled out my handy shop manual, which if you don't have one of these for your Corvette or any of your cars, really, I think they're invaluable. So yeah, I flip over to the instrument panel section here, of course, and it basically steps you through various locations of where things are. Gives you some general information and then gives you some list. And if you go down and you look at the speedometer odometer test here, it says speedometer does not operate, odometer okay. Well, that wasn't my case. My odometer was not working either. In that case, it just says replace the instrument panel, instrument cluster. An odometer does not operate, speedometer okay, replace the instrument cluster. Speedometer bar graph and digital display do not operate properly, replace the cluster. I mean, anyway, it has a couple about the trip odometer and stuff. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, wow, if it doesn't work, the only option is replace the cluster. That doesn't seem logical to me. I come from an engineering background and I know there's mechanical devices involved with all this. So anyway, I flip the page over here and I look at the pinout. And if you look at the pinout on what's actually going to the instrument cluster itself, you can see here's a vehicle speed input here and also the vehicle speed input here, right? And what they tell you to do is remove the cluster and use an ohm meter to check across there, and it should read 340 to 500 ohms, which would lead you to believe that if it does that, then the device producing the output must be okay. But that isn't true. All that is doing is giving you a resistance measurement of the magnetic pickup device that's actually going to be outputting. If it's not rotating, it could still read good. Um, so anyway, I questioned that. And by the way, I just went underneath my car and disconnected the connector and hooked my ohm meter up there and read it, and it was 393 ohms, right? And of course, it's on jack stands, so I crank it and I put it in gear, and I still don't get any reading. So I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is telling me to replace the cluster again, and I know that can't be true. So anyway, if you then reference back to another section in the manual, you'll see the vehicle speed sensor, and you'll see over here it has a very clear picture showing you the gear drive and the pickup assembly and then the coil. So all you're doing when you're reading across those 2 points as indicated in the other tables, you're simply measuring the resistance across this coil here. And that coil could be good, but that doesn't mean that gear's not stripped and that thing's not bound up in there. So digging a little bit deeper, if you go down on this page over here, you'll see again, it says, okay, speedometer does not operate properly. Yes, okay, that's my case. And ECM code 24 is set. I don't have any codes. Then it says speedometer is okay. ECM is 24, not my case. Speedometer does not operate correctly and ECM code is 24, not set. Again, replace instrument cluster. And I'm thinking this is just crazy. But if you just glance to the right of that, you'll see where it says vehicle speed sensor test. And probably a lot of reasons that people end up digging into their dashes is because they don't have a generator, right? But fortunately for me, I do have a signal generator. As a matter of fact, it's right there. It's not the one that they call for, but it's a general purpose signal generator, and it'll produce a 60 hertz output at a very, very low voltage level with a 50-50 duty cycle, meaning it's on and off at the same amount. And if you look at the table, you can see it says that with a 60 hertz signal, the speedometer should read 54 miles per hour. So anyway, I'm going to follow this up with a video where I went under the car, hooked up the generator, and yeah, so the speedometer is working fine with the generator input. So all of the replace the cluster references you get based on the test are really a little bit misleading. It's in this case, I'm sure it's going to be a mechanical thing. The gear has worn out or bound up or stripped or something like that. And I'll do a follow-up video of that, taking it out. It's not that hard. And and I've got to order a new one to put in there. But yeah, hopefully this will help some of you guys. The video will be coming up shortly. Okay, this video is mostly for Rob, but this will apply to anybody that has a you know, a $700 Ford transmission and the speedometer is not working. I replaced the gauge cluster in my old C4 here a while back, and shortly after doing that, the speedometer quit working. So there's really not that much to it. I mean, there's a speed sensor on the side of the transmission that's not too hard to get to, and if you're going by the manual, it basically says measure the, you know, the resistance across the coil of that. It's a magnetic pickup, and I did that, and that was good. So okay, that on one hand that tells you, okay, the speed, you know, the device that's given the output is okay, but that's not always the case. I come from a world of electronics where you got to test and double test. So anyway, I did a little research, and I found out that if you introduce a signal of 60 hertz using a signal generator, which I know not everybody's going to have, I just happen to have one, that speedometer should read 54 miles per hour, which is a little bit weird, but anyway, so 60 equals 54 on the speedometer. So I pulled out my handy dandy signal generator. You can see I've got it set to 59.3 hertz. Basically just took some test leads, and now I'm going underneath the car, and I'm going into the connector that normally connects to the magnetic sensor that is in the transmission. And as you can see, the speedometer is reading exactly 54. Now, if I can make this thing read anything I want to, I suppose. Very, very low amplitude, by the way, too. Less than a half volt. Let me just turn it up a little bit here. Let's see how fast we can go. Oh, 60, 70, 80. Ooh, I think I wrapped around. So let me just bring it back down. So anyway, that tells me that all the electronics, you know, in the gauge cluster are working fine. I'll go back down here and I'll sort of fine tune this to, let's go to 60, 59. Okay, 59.4. That's close enough to 60. And you can see we're reading 55 there. So I'm happy with that. Okay, it actually drifted up to 60.9. And we're reading 55. So 60, 54, 60.9, 55. Yeah, so that, I know, like I said, not everybody's going to have this kind of equipment laying around, but see, just that ohmage test would have led me to believe that the speed sensor was good, and I would have ended up taking the gauge cluster out and troubleshooting that, when in fact the problem is not this gauge cluster at all. It's probably the gear stripped on the end of the speed sensor or something simple like that. So anyway, I got to get a pan, put it on here in case there's any drippage when I pull it out, and I'll get another one and replace it, and then the speedometer will be working again. That's it.